Perfect. So yeah, great. So today, welcome Randall Smith onto the podcast. So Randall is the UK Managing Director of Veny, an EV charging specialist, which we'll obviously hear all about later. Randall has had a very interesting career, and I can't wait to dig into, including an array of leadership within the forces, in particular the Royal Air Force. Since leaving in 2015, he spent 6 years with Jaguar Land Rover, and worked his way up to head of transformation and continuous improvement, specifically looking at the electrical vehicle industry. He joined Veny 6 months ago, and I can't wait to hear about his journey. So Randall, welcome to the podcast. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much, Mark.
I've got to ask as well, obviously, it's Randall Tiny Smith on the LinkedIn. I mean, it's I presume that's ironic, but...
Well, it confuses because my military nickname is Tiny, because I'm 6'7" tall, and my civilian nickname is Randall. So whichever comes through.
Yeah. Well, I'm purely civilian, so I haven't got my stripes to call you Tiny. Whatever, yeah. It's Look, first question, I'd like to kick it off. I mean, what is it? And you've been a leader for a long time in very different environments. I mean, what does it mean to you to be a leader? Would you say?
I think to me, I started off a long time ago because I used to be a technician in the Air Force, and then I sort of worked my way up, commissioned to be an officer, and then started becoming a leader and trained to be a leader. And then ever since then, I've been in industry in that. To me, being a leader is being the person at the top with the ultimate responsibility, and also having the bigger vision of what's going on. When I was a technician, I just had a very small picture of what I was doing, what was going on, but I always wanted to find out more because I'm an engineer and I always want to know more about how things work. So being a leader gives you that bigger scope, but it also, there's an enjoyment in leading people and seeing the fruition of your efforts and goals coming through and achieving it as a team ultimately. And that gives me a personal pride when I'm leading that and the team does well and we all achieve that goal together.
Yeah, great. I love that. And that's it. I think people want to be leaders and managers for different reasons, but I think it's only when you're actually doing it, then that is the most enjoyable part of the job. When you see even a 1% change that you've made, obviously the impact that has on people, it's massive. I completely agree. Normally, first question of that is in terms of getting into manufacturing, but I'm really interested for you in terms of the route you took, obviously, which was the forces side. I mean, going into that industry and the forces, was that always something you wanted to get into? I mean, how did that sort of come about? What are the
Yeah, I mean, I had an interest in engineering and aviation when I was younger. I didn't quite have the qualifications to join up as an officer, so I joined up as an airframes technician. And then I did day release and did my education and got up to scratch because I looked up and said, right, if I want to be an officer, I need these educational qualifications. And I did that through day release. And then I went through all my interviews and selection processes to be an officer. And I was lucky enough to be accepted. And then I did 20 years as an officer, 22 years as an officer, and worked my way up to become a senior officer in there. So it was something I was always aspiring to be better than I can. Starting off as a technician, wielding the spanners, and then becoming the boss, and then becoming the senior boss of the bosses, and the senior boss of the bosses all the way up. And just keep driving and driving and driving, to better myself all the way through.
Well, why do you think that was? I mean, is that something that's always been built into you, think that just to be a better version of yourself or to be as senior as you can? What was the main sort of drive there?
It comes back to what I was saying earlier about getting that bigger vision of what was going on. Mm-hmm. So in the Air Force, you have a new career, the way the engineering profile works, you have a new career, a new job every 2 years. Mm-hmm. So every 2 years, you just work and get a new profile. Now, I was always told in the Air Force, we have what they call a career manager who manages your career for you. And they would assign you to the next job. But they always said to me that your career profile is like a funnel, that if you don't work hard, you'll fall to the bottom of the funnel and you'll get the narrowest choice of jobs. But if you work hard and swim to the top, you'll get the widest choice of jobs. And I can remember every time I worked hard, I went to see my desk officer at the time, my career manager, and I said, right, what have you got next for me? And he'd lay 6 or 7 jobs out in front of me and say, well, take your pick. And I would select the best job I was. So every job I've done in the military was a job I was after. And then likewise, when I came to Jaguar Land Rover, I started off as the PM on the Jaguar I-Pace, which was a very privileged position, and took that from concept through to final production. And then because of my background in the military, I was headhunted across the company in Jaguar Land Rover to go and install a EV charging network and prepare the retail network, 200 plus business units, to receive the Jaguar I-Pace in the UK. And I was leading teams around the country to do that. So all the way through, you just keep bettering yourself. And then I became the head of UK transformation, bettering and driving myself harder to improve and get, more experience, more exposure.
And that level of agility, I guess, that you've sort of exposure to your whole career, I imagine that put you in a very good place then to be able to move within different industries and different sectors within manufacturing, I guess, because obviously you were so used to applying a process, but different set of skills to each different job, I guess.
It is in a way, but I think you kind of get to the level where you're removed so from coalface, because I started off in aviation engineering. And then when I left the Air Force, I went into automotive engineering. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of removed from the coalface enough that the leadership and management skills apply more than knowing the technical know-how of how an aircraft works or a car works. Mm-hmm. And you start learning how to manage people and deal with people. And that becomes a particular skill in itself. And it's quite interesting the way the two ideologies work, because in the military, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. And the military, anybody, particularly at the officer level, will say it's a way of life.
Yeah.
So I was very privileged to be hosting the Queen and prime ministers and various other people, So during the day, you're doing the day job. And at night, all of a sudden, you're hosting the Queen or having dinner with a local mayor or something else. Whereas in Civvy Street, as I call it with Jaguar Land Rover, it's just a 9-to-5 job. Mm-hmm. So there's different ideologies the way it works. And the military try and get into people's mindset to understand how people work, what makes them work, what makes them tick. Whereas Civvy Street's more, well, you just come in at 9 and you go home at 5 and that's it. And I'm not bothered about what you do outside.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. When you were there, obviously, I would say it was 20 years you did in the forces altogether, was it? About 20 years?
About 30 years I did. Yeah.
Okay. Were you sort of, what stage did you get to where you were almost planning for Civvy Street? Did you have that sort of set time scale in mind? Are you going to go on to something else? Or
Yeah, I mean, I kind of reached the pinnacle of my career. The way it was going was the military there was a lot of things that came together because we were moving around every 2 years, my wife and I. My kids were in boarding school. They were just finishing the boarding school at that. I'd reached the pinnacle of my career in the Royal Air Force. So I held a position that was normally held by people 1 and 2 ranks higher than me. And I was the only one in the Air Force to hold that position. Mm-hmm. Where I was we had a thing called Haddon Cave. So we had a crash with a Nimrod in 2006. And we had the Haddon Cave inquiry, which basically said they pulled the Air Force apart because nobody was directly accountable for the crash. It was very difficult to find who was in charge. Mm-hmm. So they set up what they call the duty holder chain, where people were personally accountable for the safety of aircraft. And I was one of those. So there was 35 of us in the entire military that were personally accountable for the safety of particular aircraft. Mm-hmm. And I was the one for the search and rescue force, yellow helicopters. Mm-hmm. So I had 250 people across 9 locations around the UK, 25 helicopters. One of those locations was overseas. And I had to build up this new organization, take it off in a new direction, and build all these different pillars. And if anything went wrong with that or an incident happened, I was the one that was going to be up in court. Yeah. So if you looked at it in terms of responsibility from the CEO of the Royal Air Force, I was 3 steps down from him in terms of responsibility. Amazing. So it was quite a high pressure job to focus in. And on top of that, you've got an aircraft that's 25, 30 years old that you're trying to maintain flying, which was quite a challenge as well. So
how do you deal with the sort of the mindset wise, the pressure of that? Because like you say, that huge pressure and responsibility that it's on your shoulders when it goes up.
It comes with the training. One of the things with the military, and it's very interesting because the military personnel have a lot of things to offer. And when we go through all our training, the military are trained to be leaders in extreme environments. And if you think about it, if a flood happens, they normally call the rescue services in. But if the proverbial really hits the fan, they will call the military in.
Yeah.
And the military are taught to be leaders in a war scenario, for want of a better word. So, they make you tired when training. They make you cold, wet, tired, put you under a lot of time pressure, and you've got to perform. And that gradually trains you to be the leader that people want to follow.
Yeah.
And you don't tend to see that in Civvy Street so much. And there's always the saying that we have is that any manager can take a horse to water, but only a leader can make it drink. And that's one of the things that happens with the leadership in the military is you might have to go to somebody and say, here's your can opener, go and attack that tank. You may well die, but it's going to be for the greater good of the team and the task. And it's getting into the mindset of trying to make people do things that they may not want to do in the first place. And that comes back to understanding what makes people tick and how to make them do things and how they to get the very best from them to make them want to work.
Yeah, and I guess people who have not worked in the forces might have the wrong view of things, which is quite sort of a black and white, quite a dictatorship type environment. Forces, which I know from people that necessarily isn't. Do you think they, in terms of the way they went about that, in terms of the mindset, did you work very, very hard to help and encourage people to be the best they be, or was it quite dictatorship in terms of that environment?
No, I mean, one of the things I was always open about was when I was doing my journey from commission, from the troops, the airmen, so to speak, up to become a commissioned officer. I was very open about what I had to do, what I had to train, and everything else, and it was very good because once I got up to become an officer, I had a lot of people coming to me for advice and saying, well, what do I need to do? What training do I need to do? What do I need? Because you need to read up on current affairs and understand things and learn about various aspects before you actually apply. So I would sit down and I would train them and would have coffee breaks with them and talk to them about current affairs and what's going on in Ukraine at the moment or Afghanistan and what's your opinions on that. So, and there was quite a few people who went through the training process behind me in selection. And when they were selected, they would phone me up and say, hey, I did it. I followed your advice. Great. Thank you so much and everything else. And that to me was great because people were following and aspiring to be what I was. Yeah. And they were coming up behind me and achieving it.
Yeah, and the chain that you leave behind and is essentially a chain of much better leaders and managers.
Well, I think the big thing with the military is I come back, it's a 24-hour-a-day job.
Yeah.
And it's, as well as, okay, you get the perks, hosting the Queen and mayors or whatever else, but you deal with a lot of very extreme circumstances that a lot of people wouldn't see in Civvy Street. So I've dealt with deaths and suicides. You deal with people's marriage problems, you deal with financial problems, you deal with, partners run away or whatever else. Yeah. And you have to deal with that because that comes down to the psyche of what's in the person's mind at the moment. If somebody's got financial problems or worries or something else in his head, I really don't want him working on an aircraft right now in case he does something wrong because he's got other things on his head. Mm-hmm. So if I know that up front, I can kind of protect that person and assign them to better roles. And that's where the military become very open about how they're feeling and if they've got problems. And you become the sort of judge, jury, executioner, mother, father, brother, or whatever else, so they can come and talk to you. And that comes down to leadership again, is making yourself approachable so that people are prepared to talk to you.
And that's all encompassing, isn't it? To be that figure. And that's we've all worked with different managers. We've all worked with very standoff managers who they just want to dictate and tell you what to do, and they don't want to get involved because they think if they get too close, then it will affect relationship. And you get the ones where they're very close and they're very friendly with you, and it's to find that balance, isn't it? But I imagine in the environment you had to know everything about them because, like you say, to put them in a situation which puts their life and other lives at risk, there's a lot more at stake for that. So it's a big part of the job. How tricky was that in terms of? So I imagine coming out of that environment into Civvy Street after so long there, that is I imagine a real challenge because everyone, I guess, is very of a similar mindset in the forces. So when you come out, obviously you've got people from all walks of life and very different motivations and so on and so forth. How challenging was that for you in your first role?
I think it was very interesting because in the military side of it, I'm responsible for almost selecting people who I think could be worthy of promotion. Yeah. So I would always say to people, don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution. Mm-hmm. Because if you're bringing me a solution, you're proving to me that you're thinking on the next level up and you're worthy of consideration for promotion. Mm-hmm. The problem I found in Civvy Street when I came into Jaguar Land Rover, that there was quite a lot of people who didn't try and solve a problem. What they would do is they would tell their boss the problem. And then they would go, it's no longer my problem because I've told my boss, so therefore, he has to tell me what to do. And they would abdicate the responsibility. And I would say, well, why don't you sort it out yourself? You can easily do this. Oh, no, I need my boss to tell me. Yeah. And that started really, really frustrating me for a while. Mm-hmm. And it was little things. I had a load of guys working for me who were they were technicians effectively, and they were going out around the retailership in Jaguar Land Rover. They were complaining that they had no clout.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, we're not managers. So I just said, okay, I'll make you all managers. So I just retitled all their positions managers.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they just went, oh, I'm a manager now and everything else. And all I did was just retitle it. But they just all of a sudden they had a spring in their step. I'd done something for them that they really wanted, gave them a lot more credibility. And all of a sudden, you know, they were bounding, they were away and loving it.
Yeah.
So it's helping them out.
Do you think that it's obvious that the time in your forces, that's really benefited your career, would you say, in terms of coming out of there to the senior position?
Yeah. For me, definitely. Yeah. It allowed me to, because I had a new environment every 2 years in the military, and you'd go from one extreme to another, and then you'd be in charge of 250 people 1 minute, and then you'd be in charge of 3 people in a very, very specialized role or something else. You had to adapt your leadership style through all these varying things, and you learned to adapt very well.
Yeah.
And I always worked my leadership on three different things, 3 T's, I call them. So the first one is T for tailored, and it's tailoring it to the individual. It's finding out what makes the individual tick. So instead of me coming in to say you and saying, right, Mark, where's that task for next week? I might find out that you play football for a Saturday pub league, or you might like gardening, or you might read books or something. So I'll come to you and say, hey, how did you get on Saturday with that football? Oh, you scored the goal. Oh, great. Hey, listen, while we're here, well, how's that task getting on? And you'll try and get into the person's psyche to understand what's going on, okay? A classic one I've got at the moment is my cleaner who comes around our offices. Her mother is ill with slight dementia. So every time she comes in, I make a point of taking 5 minutes out and just talking to her and saying, how's your mother getting on? Is she okay? You know, anything we can do to help and everything else? And she loves it because she'll sit in my office and just tell me all the woes and everything else. And it's just taking time to tailor and talk to her. The next T I've got is transparency. And there was nothing worse when I was a technician working on the shop floor and turning spanners at 3 o'clock in the morning and not understanding that bigger picture. And this comes back to the leadership of wanting to know that bigger picture. So I always make sure that anyone works for me, they understand why they're doing the task, why it's imperative we get it done by this time, why it's important all the way through. So it's transparency. So the communication goes down the chain where I feed it, but likewise, I like them to feed back up the chain if they've got any problems, if they've got any issues, and there's some problem at home, and then we can work with it. And the other one is trusted. I've worked with some managers who are micromanagers and totally kill, you know, any bloody free thought or anything. So trusted is basically, there's your job, get on with it, operating within a framework, you know, empowerment of the individual. And I always try and work that.
Love that. How important do you think it is in terms of honesty, in terms of how you're feeling? Because sometimes managers, and I've fallen this trap where you feel you have to be bulletproof and have to have all the answers. I mean, COVID was a prime example where I had a lot of scared people, and I personally felt I need to be rock solid. I need to have the answers, even though I didn't have the answers all the time. And I think I probably learned that sometimes being human about things and being the one that is there for them. But all honesty, look, you know, I'm going to make mistakes here. I mean, how important do you think that is? Have you learned lessons there? Would you say?
Yeah, I think it's utmost apparent to be honest about it. And the reason I say that is because, again, coming back to the military, I would move every 2 years, and there was no way I was going to be the expert of that role within 2 years. So I would need to trust other people to watch my back, so to speak, to make sure. And part of that comes down to being approachable enough that my number 2 would come to me and say, hang on a minute, sir, you don't want to do that because of this. Oh, yeah, thanks. Okay, brilliant. So ultimately, the team have got to accept that if we mess up, I'm the one that's standing up and taking the bullet, right? And even if the team mess up, I'll be the first to stand up and take the bullet and say, it's my team, let's sort it. I won't go drilling into the individual and say, you bloody idiot. Let's just say, how do we make, you know, we messed up here. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What lessons can we learn from that? Because if I go drilling into him, it's going to scare everybody else, and they're not going to admit what the faults are. So again, it comes back to that transparent communication up and down the chain.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just being open and honest enough that if I've got a problem, I will tell my staff, it's, hey, look, I've got a few problems with this. Can you just sort of watch what's going on with this over here and watch my back? Because ultimately, we're a team. We are trying to achieve a common goal, and we are working as a team. And I'd rather people want to follow me because they like what I'm doing and how I operate it, rather than following me out of curiosity to see what I'm going to screw up next.
Yeah, absolutely. How challenging, and I guess what advice you have for, because you've been in situations, I guess, where you've inherited a team, where you've changed your roles, whether that be in, for a new company or within internal change. How challenging is that when you do that? And, from day one, in terms of getting everyone on board and to your mentality, what advice would you give people who've perhaps moved jobs to an inherited team?
I think the first thing you do is get to know your team. So I made a point of going out and sitting with my people in the office. I've got a lot of people out on the road.
Yeah.
What we call civils gangs who go out digging roads and everything else.
Yeah.
And I went out and spent 3 days with them.
Yeah.
And I was watching them dig trenches, and I remember hauling a cable 4 floors up, and I was up there with my suit and, pulling cables up, moving machinery around and everything else. Just get involved with them and understand. And again, it comes back to that tailored approach. It's understanding what makes people tick, what challenges the team's got when they're out on their road, digging up a road, or when they're trying to put something together against a time scale. And the people in the office, I'll go and just sit and talk with them and find out, do they play football for a Saturday league, or do they like gardening, or do they do this, or current affairs, or whatever else, and just sit and have a coffee with them. Yeah. And then just little things like, people, we got a kitchen in our office here next to our office, and we all make coffees for each other. And I'm not scared to go out and make coffees for everybody else. And I'll go out and buy a packet of biscuits for everyone else as well. I'll be part of the gang. I'm not one of these people who sit back and say, well, I'm the boss, you do everything. Just get involved, get stuck in, talk to your team, because your team are more likely to trust you.
And I think what's really interesting there, I think there's still a bit of a stigma, I think, behind, because I've recruited engineers for 10, 12 years, and I must have replaced 50 or 60 ex-forces engineers, superb people. And in my eyes, I'll argue till I'm blue in the face that coming from that sort of background into what I was recruiting for was maintenance engineers is a fantastic way to get into it, because exactly what you mentioned, the array of things you have to get involved with. There's still a stigma, I think, where there's a lot of companies out there within engineering manufacturing who aren't sure that they will match that environment and it will be right for their culture. There's still a bit of a stigma, and I think it's changing, but that is still very much the case. And I think what's interesting there, you said there, is everyone's on the same level. And I think that there's this stigma that, yes, because the forces is a structure like that people at the top are going to be very, very, speak to people right below in a manner that isn't going to help them progress, which is obviously not the case, because you mentioned there, I'm sure you speak on behalf of a lot of people within the industry that isn't the case. Outside looking in on black and white piece of paper, it might look that way. Is that a fair stigma that you've come across, would you say?
I think it is. I did a post on the military a while back about what the benefits the military personnel will offer. And one of the challenges the military has is we have a very, we don't sell ourselves well, because we have a pride in ourselves. We just get on and do the task. And you have this thing called a can-do attitude. If the job needs doing, they will do it regardless of what the challenges are.
Yeah.
And the other difficult thing that the military sometimes find is the translation of the military skills into civilian street, as you and I probably well know. So, but the military have got an inbuilt discipline. Mm-hmm. They've got leadership skills if they've gone up to corporal or above. Yeah. So they know how to handle people. They've got a discipline that they'll be there at 8 o'clock in the morning when it starts, and they'll be there till 5 o'clock. And if the job takes past 5, they won't be downing tools at 5 o'clock, so they only get paid till 5. They'll just carry on working afterwards. Mm-hmm. And it's just the military have got so many benefits to bring to any company because of all the qualities and traits that they can bring and sell through. But it's just getting someone to understand that from a civilian side, because a lot of people think, they're just going to shout at people. Doesn't always happen like that.
Yeah, it is. I do think that. I think it's changing, but that is very much still a stigma. That there's that dictatorship. So it is very different. So I think these chats are interesting because people need to know more about it. So that's great. Every time we talk, you strike me as someone who is a very inspirational leader, and I'm sure if I asked a lot of people who their best manager was, you would be there. And that's obviously because of the journey you've had and who you are. I mean, who would you say along the way has motivated you and been a real inspiration to you, do you think, throughout the years?
I think there's quite a few. Military-wise, what I tended to do early on was I tended to watch leaders and watch managers. And I would watch how they behaved, and then being on the other side of the fence, understand how other people saw them as well. And I would look at them and think, oh, that's a good, that skill there is very good. I didn't agree with that, but that skill he does over there is very good as well. And I tried to sort of concoct this ideal manager approach of what a manager should be. And it's being part of the team and being prepared to stand up and take the bullet, so to speak. It's not being the dictator at the top. A lot of managers think they're leaders, but then their staff will say something else and don't think of as leaders, that sort of thing. So a leader to me has always got that sort of quiet authority around them, but they don't have to enforce it. A good leader to me has quiet authority around them, but you don't see him, standing up in the room and shouting, right, we're going to do this, blah, 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 and everything else. And I'll be having my coffee in my office, this sort of thing. So there's so many that I've had. I've had some managers in the Air Force where I was working with very, very high pressure roles, working with overseas operations. And I've had managers that kick my proverbial all over the bloody room, getting tasked on because everything was last minute, had to be done yesterday. Yeah. But then when it came to the down times and the chill times and appraisal times, for example, I got praised to hilt because I stuck with him. We got things done, and together we got through this. And that to me meant a lot. Yeah. Because the first challenge you have is when you become a manager or a leader in a new position is you have to understand what your bosses want. Because what you don't want is your boss wants ABC and you go off doing DEF. Yeah. You've got to try and adapt so that you're aligned with your boss, but also sort of steer that you're both working in the same direction. And one of the big analogies I always give in any new place is if you take something like a pyramid. So a pyramid's been around for about 4,500 years. So it's probably a good example. It's lasted the test of time. But if you look at a pyramid, at the very pinnacle of a pyramid is a customer. And in that pyramid, you've got your suppliers, and then you've got your company perhaps, and then you've got your retailers, your business outlet, selling a product to that customer at the top. And the strength of the pyramid is everybody, regardless of rank or position, pulling together to hold that pyramid, to prop up that person at the top. And that customer at the top buying our product is paying everybody's wages in that pyramid. Yeah. So unless we all work together and pull together and support each other to get that customer to buy our product, we are all out of a job. Yeah. So we have to work together to get that customer to buy our product and also recommend our product to his friends and keep buying our product. Yeah. But it only comes with everybody working together to support that pyramid and bind it together and make it happen. And
that's culture, isn't it? That's breeding a loyal culture, essentially, where everyone's working towards the same goal. And it's hard, isn't it, to be able to do that? It takes time. It only takes a couple of people don't buy into that to that culture to be shattered. But I love that analogy. It's great. I'm a big fan of it. In terms of JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, obviously, what a brilliant business to be able to have got into after forces. I imagine, for your career, that must have been a brilliant time to spend, 6 and a bit years and in your trade. So how did you get into the EV side then? Was that was something that sort of organically went there, or what was the situation?
It was a growing thing because it was interesting. When I joined Jaguar Land Rover, I joined as the PM for the Jaguar I-Pace. Yeah. Had no idea what the I-Pace was. It was coded as X590, and to me it was a car. That was it. But the more we got into it, it was the first premium electric vehicle from a premium OEM, in Europe. And the car went on to win 62 International Awards, Car of the Year in 2018. And it was a very, very special car to get involved with because it was new. Yeah. I got heavily involved with the battery side of it as well because Jaguar Land Rover never dealt with this battery, 700 kg, 400 volts. And it was like, what do we do with this? How do we handle it? What the logistics and blah, blah, and everything else. So I had to sort of formulate all the policy for Jaguar Land Rover to sort of put all that together and how we deal with it, as well as running the program for the car. And then eventually, after we did all the prototypes and got everything working, we moved everything over to Graz in Austria, and we built the car out there. So just before we were doing that, just as we were about to sort of launch, they wanted someone in the UK National Sales Centre to set up the UK network to receive the Jaguar I-Pace. And I was sort of headhunted across. to lead that operation. So I had people across the UK in 10 regions around the UK, and we had to effectively electrify each of the 200 retailerships. So there was 200 units all the way around, and we had to put in a charging point to each one. We had to train up technicians to live work. We had to get all the safety policy in place and all the tooling and everything else. Yep. And I had to coordinate all that. And then what we did was we selected a couple of retailers in each region, and as they were trained up, the iPace launched behind me into those retailers, and then I was like a wave going across the UK as the iPace was launching behind us. And that was a very, very privileged position to get into it. So through the virtue of that with the EV and then EV charging side, I ended up with this sort of 360-degree knowledge and experience of EVs from the concept through to production, out to the retailer and out to the customer, and then back from the customer into servicing. Yeah. And I ended up with this whole thing. So I thrived on that. And then I just started writing on LinkedIn about my thoughts, my understanding, and studying the subject. And then I became this LinkedIn influencer, and I speak at conferences now on EVs and EV charging.
Yeah, that must have been a real proud moment though when you saw the car in the flesh the first time on the roads. I mean, they were definitely one of the first to be out there, weren't they? Yeah,
very much so, very much so. Yeah. And it's quite good now because I'll see people. There's a guy in our village who's got an iPace. I'll see people with an iPace. I'll just go over to them and say, "How did you find the car?" And they go, "What do you want to know?" I said, "Well, I was the PM on the car. I know all about it." "Oh, really?" And then we start talking about it and everything else. Yeah. And it's really great to sort of see people appreciating the Jaguar iPace and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's kicking on and kicking on, isn't it? I mean, people will put their head in the sand until they need to. And now with diesel prices what they are, I think we'll see an even bigger influx into EV. I mean, I've had one I've got an e-tron, so I've had my electric car for 6 months now. And it is, you do feel you're part of this special club. To some extent, it's
going to get better because the government's banning the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles in 2030. And last year, I think about 45% of new registrations were EV based. So either PHEV or fully EV or HEV or anything else. And it's just getting more and more all the way through. So we're going that way. And I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn busting myths about EVs. The grid will never cope, or it's too expensive, or they'll never catch on, and everything else. And I'm like, okay, let's write another article about it. Yeah, and this is why I get invited to conferences and stuff and say, "Can you just speak about this?" Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it. It's a great arena, and it's a growing arena as well. So it's a fabulous area to be in.
The technology is just getting better and better, and I think that's the main thing. I think when people have got full confidence the technology is there, I think it will just go bang. I think it will 100%. And but with diesel prices what they are, that can only be a good thing for EV without doubt, because people
very much so. Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? This is a management podcast, but I'm always interested in manufacturing technology as well. What do you think are the main challenges for the next couple of years that EV specialists need to sort of to get involved in, I guess, to tackle mainstream now?
So one of the big worries at the moment is a thing called range anxiety.
Yes.
Where people are worried about how far the range of the car will go. And most cars now, EVs, will do 200, 250 miles on a good day. Yeah. I've got a Tesla that does about 360, so it's a long range version.
Yeah.
And one thing you don't really need to worry about range anxiety, because most average journeys are only 20 miles anyway a day. So why, if you've got a 200-mile range car, be worried? But then people are worried about the time it takes to charge the car and if there's enough charging networks, and that's the business I'm in at the moment, is growing that.
Yeah.
But I think where we're seeing the industry going is there's new battery technology, and there's going to be a step change in battery technology to what they call solid state batteries.
Yeah.
And that makes a lighter battery, but instead of taking 30 minutes to 45 minutes to fully charge a battery, you can now recharge a solid state battery within 5 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that starts becoming comparable, refilling your car with diesel and petrol.
Absolutely.
On top of that as well, the range also goes far out, and you start to talk 400 or 500 miles in range. So all of a sudden, your dependency on the charging network diminishes because you don't need so many chargers, and your range anxiety goes out the window because you've got plenty of range on your car and you don't need to charge it so often. So that's the next major change that's coming. The other thing with manufacturers is when we launched the iPace, it was a premium OEM, so a premium EV, so it was more expensive. And you're starting to see the cheaper £25,000, £30,000 EVs coming out now, and they need to do that to get that mass market appeal. No, EVs are no longer for the precious few at the top who can afford them. They need to make them more affordable, and you're starting to see manufacturers do that now, push them down.
Completely good. You bang on it. It's a complete mindset thing, and it takes some time. And I was one of the first ones, but my is the lower level in terms of it's the e-tron. The range is probably the worst you can get to some extent now. I still love the car. You get 140 miles, and you're right. It's very rare I'll go more than 140 miles, and I've got a home charger. It's an absolute doddle. I'll charge them when I want, and you're away. And it is nice to be part of that community and thinking, right, A, I don't have to pay X amount for diesel. B, it's helping the environment. And yeah, you do feel part of this sort of club, which is growing, but 100% that as soon as which they are cracking the range to sort of double and triple what the cars like mine can do. And when people can just have the confidence that they can charge, it takes them 10 minutes. I mean, even now, I went to Morrison's this weekend. I charged up there, I did my shopping, and it'd gone 70, 80 miles up. So I think when people know that's it becomes your routine, it's fine. It's just getting your head around that.
I think, the classic saying I say is owning an EV is a change of mindset, and people are naturally resistant to change.
Yeah.
But I've not met anybody yet who's jumped into an EV who's regretted it afterward, because you get that instantaneous acceleration. It's a joy to drive. And the running costs, particularly if you've got a home charger, are about a third of the cost of a diesel or petrol vehicle. So there's so many benefits to it. It's just a case we're all going to be there. So the sooner we jump, the more benefits and savings you're going to achieve.
Yeah, exactly that. So, I mean, obviously, Veny working with now. What was that like going from obviously, you can't get much bigger in terms of Jaguar Land Rover to essentially business, which is, I guess you were sold on the vision and what they're sort of working towards. So what was that sort of change like for you going into a business like that?
Very interesting, because you come from a very, very large corporate environment where everything's kind of structured and you have your dealings, into the smaller company, 65 people. And they have a vision on the EV side. They've sort of dabbled into it, but they have a vision of where they want to go.
Yeah.
And you need to build it up there. So you pretty much start with a blank sheet. Okay, you've done some charging, and okay, how are we going to build this business, and where are our rivals, and how are we going to build this and take it forward? And that, to me, excited me, because it sort of started with a blank sheet, big whiteboard. Let's scribble this out. Let's draw it out. Right. Okay. We need to do this. We need to get to this stage, that stage, that stage. Which companies can we contact to start working for them to get some experience? What about finance? What about teams? What about this, that, and the other? And it's exciting times, because you're molding it the way you want it. And you're bringing people behind you in that leadership role as well, to say, right, this guy, he's got a vision. Let's work for him because we like what he's saying. And again, it comes back to that thing. I'd rather people follow me because they like how I operate and what I do, rather than out of curiosity to see what I'm going to screw up. Yeah. So, and to me, that's a great privilege when people want to work for me.
Yeah, excellent stuff. So, and I guess for you now, then, say you're used to inheriting big teams. This is different, I guess. This is growing teams and getting people to start you at the right at the beginning, which I guess is a different but quite exciting scenario to be in, I imagine, for you.
Yeah, very much so. Very much. I mean, this as I say, we've got a number of people who've already done some EV installations now, and we're just sort of taking it up to the next level. But again, there's times we're cutting new ground. So all of a sudden we'll do a big public charging network, or we did one recently up in Manchester, and we had to haul this cable up 4 floors and put in 12 chargers outside and everything else. And some of that was cutting new ground for us. How the hell are we going to get this cable up to 4 floors? We had to get a hydraulic lift in and work out all the plots for that. And then how we were going to do the plans and lay everything out outside, and where we were going to put the big feeder pillar and where it was going to come through the building. And so you're cutting new ground all the time, and we're learning all the time. No job's the same. Everything's very different. Cables take different routes. There's different challenges. Where somebody wants a charge box, where a council wants their charge boxes. We did one in a council recently, and there was 30 meters of cable, and they said, just pull a new cable under the ground through the ducting. And when we went to pull it, the cable wouldn't move, because whoever put it in had just buried it in the ground under the tarmac. So we then had to recut a whole new plan and give the council a new plan. And they went, oh yeah, brilliant, great, do it. And away we went. So every day is an exciting new challenge, so to speak.
Yeah. And look, you strike me as someone who is just very, very driven and very, very positive. After 35, 36 years, What's motivating you now? What's the big driver for you? I guess it must be a different sort of motivator than starting out in the forces and wanting to keep progressing.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's just making the most of the opportunity and growing the company. I mean, I'm the manager director of it, so the buck stops with me basically if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
And I've got a great job at the moment. I live 10 minutes down the road. I've got an office here in Daventry and an office up in Manchester. I travel around the country, and I've got a Tesla that I travel, and I've got an EV and everything else. But all that comes at a price, and I've got to make the company work. So there's that incentive to make the company work and do it and make it, work with my connections, get the work in, go out to pubs, garden centres, that sort of place, and touch base with those people and do work with them and councils, etc. So it's I have to make it work because of the position I'm in. I can't rely on anybody else. It's got to work, and every day is a challenge. So that's what I love. I enjoy coming into work. The moment I don't enjoy coming into work, and I know the job's not for me, and pretty much every job I've done throughout my military career in Jaguar Land Rover, I've always had a buzz where I've wanted to come into work because I've shaped it or done something, and I wanted to do what how I was going to do it.
Yeah, love that. And I guess with the military, like you say, it is your life when you're in there, and it's not a job, work, life situation. It's all encompassing. Have you managed the work-life balance well, or is that something that you've sort of learned to deal with? I guess it's very different, like you say.
I've always, since I've been a leader, since my military days, I'm at the level where the job is a 24-hour-a-day job.
Yeah.
So even theoretically, I'm working from 8 till 5. I could be up in the Manchester office till 6 o'clock at night, and then I've got a 2.5-hour drive home.
Yeah.
And that just comes. And then other times I'll have to be in Leeds for a 10 o'clock appointment, which means I've got to get on the road at, say, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. You just do it because of the rough with the smooth. It comes with the benefits. And if you want to hold this position, then you have to do whatever it takes. Yeah. It annoys me sometimes when I see other directors. It's just, no, I only do 9 to 5, Well, or I can't do the meeting before 11 o'clock because it's going to take me 3 hours to get up there. Well, flex a little bit. If you want the rewards and the status, you need to flex and, be seen to do that and take the rough with the smooth. And what you tend to find then is if I'm prepared to do that, very often my staff will do that as well. Even though they're only paid 9 to 5, my commercial manager will be here till 6 o'clock at night, even though she's only paid till 5, and we'll be working through another thing. Because there's that flex. So when we have downtime and it goes a bit quieter, I'm quite happy for her to take an hour out maybe to sort of repay back what all the effort she's putting up the front.
And that comes down to leadership, lead from front, and that comes down to your pyramid again, isn't it? That's into that. So no, I love that. Some sort of questions I'd like to ask towards the end. I mean, I guess this one, well, you've got an obvious answer, but I might ban it. In terms of what's the most innovative piece of technology or strategy you've implemented for change? You're not allowed the iPace because that's too obvious. So, I mean, for you, in terms of, what would you say would be the biggest change you've made, either for someone or for a business, or I guess innovative technology you've put into sort of develop a business? Would you say?
It's not so much. One of the ways I always operate is I always like to meet people face to face.
Yeah.
So talking to somebody over Zoom, it's very easy for them to have another screen and get distracted about something on the screen or a phone call or whatever else. But if I come in and sit on your desk and we have a coffee or away from work in a Starbucks or something, you get so much more business done talking with companies.
Yeah.
And meeting them face to face, putting, all I see is your head and shoulders. But if I see the body and the legs and see what coffee like and everything else, so much more business is done. So I made a point of that, and I made a big change for Jaguar Land Rover. If I come back to my last role in the searcher in the Royal Air Force, I was the head of engineering for the search and rescue helicopter force, and I had 250 people and everything else, 9 locations. And my remit when I came in was I had to set up a new engineering structure, a new safety structure, a new risk structure, and everything else, and all these different pillars. So they had 200 contractors working with them, and I had to bring another 50 military guys in to sort of spear all this. And there was a lot of resistance from the contractors. Well, no, we've always done it like this. We're not changing everything else. So I had to literally go out and travel each of the sites and sit with the managers and say, look, we've got to make this work, you and I. how do we make this work? What, and then what we do is you break down the barriers. Well, it never worked. Well, why not? Why won't it work? Let's break that down. Let's do this and have a coffee with them and buy donuts and all the rest of it. And just talk face to face and go for it. And you slowly get them to realize that ultimately I'm one at the top that's going to be in court, and I need your assistance to work with me to make sure that I don't end up in court. And then how can we make this work, and just break down those barriers and talk it and chew it through until we get agreement and make it go. Brilliant. So to me, the best tool is communication. There isn't a Fandango, software tool that goes, right, this is it. That's what leadership's all about. Yeah. It's just being able to talk to people, being calm. I never get angry with people, because I was always taught many years ago that if you get angry, you lose the debate, because you start thinking irrationally, you say things that are irrational. Yep. I don't need to get angry with people. If somebody's in front of me and they know they've done something wrong, then 9 times out of 10, that's enough of a punishment to them to realize that. And I come back to the point earlier, right? You do realize you've messed up. Yeah, okay. So how can we ensure that this doesn't happen again? Because this is bad on all of us, okay? And then we'll work through and put a solution in place to stop it happening again.
Great, love that. Excellent. And advice-wise for yourself, if you go back to, well, I guess day one of management, which was for you, would have been, how old were you at the time? Your first ever stint?
20, something like that, yeah.
So going back to that day and giving yourself advice now, if you could, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself, do you think?
I think there's a couple of things. So the first thing is, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So listen more than you speak. Yeah. You see a lot of leaders going in very autocratic and going, right, you ought to do this, blah, 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 and everything else. 9 times out of 10, listen to what your troops are telling you, okay? So 2 ears and 1 mouth. Coming into that, it's very easy for a manager to come into a place and go, right, everybody change and everybody do this. You've got to remember that you're going into an organization that may have been honed over 5, 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And they may have done everything already that you're suggested. So if you're going in and say, right, everyone over to the right, they went, yeah, we did that 5 years ago and it didn't work because of this, this, and this. So the first thing to do is 2 ears, 1 mouth, go out and talk to people and understand what makes the business tick. Yeah. What is going on right? What is going wrong? What do people think could be improved? And a lot of it is, when I was Jaguar Land Rover doing the transformation role, we go out into retailers to help them improve. And the best way to find out how things should improve is talk to the people who are doing the job and say, what would make your job better, right? Because you do your job. I've got some ideas in my head of best practice, but what would make your job better? And then listen to what they've got to say. Yeah. And they may come up and say, oh, God, I don't like this. Or if we only did that, well, why isn't that happening? Oh, because of them over there. So you go and talk to them over there and say, well, why can't they do that? Oh, because we haven't got the plans for that. Oh, okay. So then you drill through and find, and you just try and make everybody talk to each other and work out and say, okay, I could do this if you did that. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. And it's just that 2 ears, 1 mouth, talking to people, communicating, listening what the challenges are, and being open and receptive to how to make things better.
And again, that's communication, isn't it? Everything. Yeah. That's communication. Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so.
And in terms of, I guess manufacturing as a whole, I think I love manufacturing and engineering. It's got its challenges, I think, over the next 5 years. I mean, how do you think how can we start to improve the next sort of the vision and the future of manufacturing? What do you say?
I think it's going to get very, very interesting, because everything's moving towards autonomy and robotics and everything else. So you get a lot of people are very worried about their jobs. Yeah. Robot coming in. I mean, Jaguar Land Rover, when they were I went up to production factories and you see these robots throwing panels all over the place and welding, and you think, wow, you're never going to be able to match that. And people were complaining about it. And it's talking to people. It's giving them the confidence that you're doing things for the better. Mm-hmm. You're still going to need manpower to control robots and put things together. And there's still going to be elements that only people can do. But I think there's going to be more robotics involved, more production, more 24-hour-a-day production. Yeah. And higher standards, because, you're making vehicles lighter, you're making carbon fiber vehicles. EVs are getting lighter, they're getting more efficient. Technology is moving on all the time. It's just keeping abreast with the technology and what's going on.
I completely agree. It's just a change of skill set, isn't it? It's just been agile. Yeah. And like I say, yes, to some extent, robotics will replace certain jobs, but new jobs, different jobs will come about because of the high skills. And I think manufacturers and engineers have got a responsibility now to act now to try and make sure those skills are trained and apprenticeships through everything, because
it's being flexible, really, because I say I did the switch from aviation into automotive, and now I've done the switch from automotive into EV charging. Okay, it's not so much of a switch, but it's still another area. And it's just being flexible to do that mindset change, and don't get so stuck in the way and say, oh no, I can only do aircraft engineering. Well, okay, there's jobs over here in EV that are going to promote you and get you better. So it's just be flexible and being adaptable to take on new challenges, which is what I do all the way through my life, take on new challenges.
Exactly that. Excellent. And look, just finally, in terms of, Veny, what does the next sort of 2-3 years look like then? What the plans moving forward? It sounds exciting so far.
So hopefully we'll take on world domination next. No, I think it's going very, very well. We've got plans in place, and we are getting a name for ourselves now, and we are installing around the UK. We're taking on bigger and bigger jobs. We've just done 12 charges for a company up in Manchester. We've done a couple of councils. We've done home charges as well. And we operate across the home, the commercial, the public, and the destination charging arenas. And as we're establishing ourselves and getting our name out there, we are starting to get noticed. So we've now got people coming to us. Oh, I've heard about this Veny. I'm going out and selling them. And again, face-to-face meeting with a guy in a hotel, and then you find out there's a chain of hotels. We can do this business with you, and we can work this. So people are starting to take notice with that. So hopefully we're a company that's going to grow. And the plan is in 3 years, we become a mainstay name, win a couple of awards in the industry as well. And go on for world domination. But no, it's just making a very successful company and a very successful team. That's what we're about. Yeah,
look, it sounds exciting. I'm sure you there that'll definitely happen. So thank you very much, Randall. I really appreciate it, buddy.
No problem at all.